Welcome to a new episode of Cheaters Always Cheat. Like, subscribe, and share to stay connected.
I've known my wife for 6 years, and we've been married for 5. I'm 28, and she's 27. Currently, my wife is pregnant and has taken a break from her job as a police officer to prepare for the baby. The whole mess began when a couple of rude police officers came to our door to threaten me. This led to a massive confrontation, which she started, and I ended up throwing her out of the house. One of these officers seemed to think that just because he wore a badge, I should be intimidated by him. This officer used to be my wife's partner in her patrol car back when she was still active on the force. They had been working together for about a year, and my wife has been in the police force for 4 years. Ever since she started partnering with this guy, her behavior has changed, and our marriage has been deteriorating. During our argument, things escalated quickly. She slapped me first, and in a fit of rage, I threw her out of the house. She called her partner, and he showed up at our door, threatening to arrest me if I continued to upset my wife. I've always had suspicions about their relationship, and now I'm convinced something is going on between them. Let me give you some background on how things got to this point. When my wife was considering a career in law enforcement, she had just graduated from community college with a degree in criminal justice. At that time, I was between jobs, and we were struggling financially. The police department offered a good salary, so she decided to join the force. However, she never intended to make it her lifelong career because of the inherent risks involved. I remember a particular incident that underscores these risks. She responded to a domestic dispute, and while trying to make an arrest, she ended up getting seriously injured. I had to visit her in the hospital, and seeing her like that was terrifying. As I reflect on all this, I realize how much her job has changed her and affected our relationship. Ever since she started working with her current partner, things have only gotten worse. The way they interact makes me suspicious, and the recent confrontation only heightened my fears. This whole situation is a tangled web of professional and personal conflicts that seem to have no easy solution. What happened was that my wife had been called to respond to a domestic dispute involving a woman and her intoxicated boyfriend. She went to the man's house, thinking it might be a simple situation to handle. Unfortunately, she didn't have her partner with her that day because he was sick, leaving her to deal with the situation on her own. She knocked on the door, but there was no answer, which made her cautious but still determined to resolve the issue. Then, she heard a woman screaming from inside the house. Reacting quickly, she called for backup and tried to get inside as fast as she could. It took her a few minutes of struggling with the door, but she eventually managed to break in. When she did, she found the intoxicated man aggressively attacking his girlfriend. The sight was horrific and demanded immediate action. My wife pulled out her taser and attempted to subdue him, but instead of calming him down, it only made him angrier. He became even more enraged and charged at her before she had the chance to reach for her firearm. They got into a violent struggle, with her taking the brunt of the attack. Despite the danger, she managed to hold on and protect herself until backup finally arrived and took control of the situation. This incident was a terrifying experience for both of us. It was one of those near-death scenarios that highlighted just how dangerous her job was, where she could have easily lost her life. When I visited her in the hospital, I was overwhelmed with emotions. Seeing her lying there, she looked like she had been in a severe car crash. Her face was swollen, bruised, and the doctors told us that she had nearly lost an eye in the struggle. It was a profound wake-up call for both of us, emphasizing the peril she faced every day on the job. I stayed by her bedside in the hospital for 2 full days, not wanting to leave her alone even for a moment. Her recovery process was lengthy, not only physically but mentally as well. The trauma from the incident took a toll on her, and she needed to take a paid leave for almost a month to fully recuperate. During her recovery period, we had several serious conversations about her future. We discussed the possibility of her transitioning from law enforcement to a safer career, like becoming a TSA agent. Although it wouldn't pay as much, the thought of her being in a less dangerous job gave me peace of mind. The constant worry that every day she stepped out of the house could be her last was unbearable. Around that time, I was nearing the completion of my mechanic training and was taking on side jobs to help cover our rent and utility bills. After she recovered, she returned to work, but her superiors assigned her to a desk job to help rebuild her confidence before she went back into the field. I remember vividly how, during the first week of her desk job, she would come home every day frustrated and restless. She complained about how slow and monotonous the desk job was compared to the excitement and adrenaline of being out in the field. She missed the sense of adventure and the dynamic environment that came with being a police officer, despite the risks. This entire experience was a pivotal moment in our lives. It not only tested her strength and resilience but also highlighted the sacrifices and dangers inherent in her line of work. While the desk job was a necessary step in her recovery, it also made us both deeply reflect on the future and the balance between safety and the passion she had for her job. The ordeal brought us closer together, reinforcing our commitment to each other and to making decisions that would ensure her well-being and our peace of mind. I reminded my wife about the time she rushed into action without waiting for backup, pointing out the dangers of acting too quickly. I assured her that with time, she'd get used to the new pace of her desk job. My wife has this habit of talking about her work in great detail when she gets home. She describes everyone and everything at her workplace. I usually just listen and let her vent because she needs an outlet. It's either me or a therapist, and we can't afford a therapist, so I'm her sounding board. About 6 months into her desk job, she started talking a lot about this new guy who had recently left the Marines and joined the police force. She complained about how cocky he was, acting like he was some kind of G.I. Joe. She spoke of him with clear annoyance, mentioning his arrogance, disrespect, and how much she despised him. She even shared stories she'd heard about him mistreating detainees and breaking the law. My usual response was to suggest that she could blow the whistle and report him. I told her she'd be protected from retaliation if she did, or she could just try to ignore him. Honestly, I thought she might be overreacting. From what she described, it seemed like she might be jealous or at least overly fixated on him. My wife has always disliked overly arrogant people. I remember how much she loathed Trump. She couldn't stop talking about him. She even attended a women's march against him and became more liberal because of it. I've never been very interested in politics, so I figured she was maybe making a big deal out of this guy. I thought she saw him as some sort of mini Trump who had gotten under her skin, and she was just venting her frustration. She's always had strong opinions about people who are full of themselves, and this new guy seemed to fit that description perfectly. I tried to be supportive, even though I didn't fully understand why he bothered her so much. Despite my attempts to reassure her and suggest solutions, her stories about him continued. Each day she came home with new complaints and more frustration. It was clear that this guy was a significant source of stress for her, but I still believed she might be blowing things out of proportion. After all, she's passionate and has a strong sense of justice, which sometimes leads her to react intensely to people who don't share her values. This routine of hers, coming home and unloading her workday on me, became our new normal. As much as I wished we could afford a therapist, I was determined to support her the best I could. Listening to her frustrations about this guy, about work, and everything in between became my way of being there for her, even if I didn't always grasp the full depth of her concerns. So, this continued for about a month, and then suddenly, it all stopped. She stopped complaining about that guy at work, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. At first, I felt relieved that she wasn't bringing him up anymore. It was like a breath of fresh air in our conversations. But a few weeks later, she started talking about going back to fieldwork. The idea made me nervous, and I expressed my disagreement, telling her it wasn't a good idea. I was genuinely concerned about her safety and well-being, especially after what had happened before. She dropped the subject for a short while, but then she brought it up multiple times afterward, insisting she'd only have light duties. I reminded her of the risks involved, emphasizing how light duty had landed her in the hospital before. I hoped that would put an end to the conversation, but it seemed like she couldn't shake the idea of returning to the field. Later, she mentioned working extra shifts. While I appreciated her desire to contribute more, it struck me as odd because we weren't in dire need of money at the time. Financially, we were doing fine. It was just the two of us, and she didn't want kids. I did want children eventually, but I wasn't in a hurry. Her sudden eagerness to work overtime raised suspicions in my mind. I began suspecting that she had returned to patrol secretly, against my wishes. So, I tried to catch her in the act. When she told me about working overtime, I decided to pay a surprise visit to the police station where she was supposed to be. However, I couldn't access the office area without her noticing I was there. So, I waited for her, but she didn't come out during lunchtime or when her shift should have ended. My patience wore thin, and after waiting for what felt like an eternity, I reluctantly went home, feeling frustrated and anxious. When she returned from work, I confronted her about it, determined to get to the bottom of things. But she brushed off my concerns, insisting that she was in her office the whole time. I found her explanation unconvincing, especially considering the circumstances. She knew they wouldn't allow me into her office area, making it impossible for me to confirm whether she was on patrol unless I waited and caught her in the act. This whole situation left me feeling uneasy and unsettled. It seemed like she was keeping something from me, and her secrecy only fueled my suspicions. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something significant from me, and it weighed heavily on my mind. Despite her reassurances, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that something was amiss, and it began to take a toll on our relationship. I went to great lengths in my quest for answers, resorting to purchasing a radio scanner, a gadget that I had only ever seen in action-packed movies. Armed with this tool, I dedicated myself to listening in on police communications for 2 consecutive days, painstakingly documenting every transmission. What caught me off guard the most was the revelation that the very man she had been labeling as arrogant, even likening him to Trump, had now become her new partner in the patrol car. At that moment, my suspicions weren't immediately directed towards any romantic involvement between them. Instead, my primary concern revolved around the fact that she had deceived me and potentially put herself in harm's way, risking injury or worse. It appeared as though she was channeling her inner G.I. Jane, craving the excitement and thrills depicted in her favorite cop dramas. However, in my eyes, she seemed too fragile and endearing for the demanding rigors of a patrol job. I found myself grappling with the perplexity of how she had even been assigned to such a role. Upon her return home that fateful evening, I could no longer contain my mounting apprehensions. I confronted her about the situation, reminding her of the ironic twist that had led her to be partnered with the very person she had once criticized. Her explanation fell short, citing a lack of alternatives and claiming that the decision had been out of her hands. Attempting to inject a positive spin on the situation, she argued that having a partner willing to accompany his wife on patrol would enhance her safety. Yet, I couldn't help but counter her argument, asserting that such protection wouldn't have been necessary if she had remained in her safer desk job or opted to leave the police force altogether. Our discussion evolved into a tense and impassioned debate, with both of us fiercely defending our respective viewpoints, unwilling to yield ground. However, when I confronted her about my suspicions after catching her in a lie, she seemed to dismiss my concerns altogether. Instead, she began to share with me how much she had come to enjoy her work in the police force, expressing newfound aspirations of advancing her career to become a detective and climb the ranks. It was clear to me that someone had been exerting influence over her, shaping her thoughts and opinions. It seemed likely that she had been listening intently to the perspectives of her new patrol car partner, and now, she was starting to echo his sentiments. Initially, I should have recognized this shift as a warning sign, but I chose to push it aside, believing in the integrity of my wife. However, as time went on, I couldn't help but notice a gradual transformation in her demeanor. Her conversations took on a different tone, and the way she interacted with me no longer felt familiar. Her work schedule became increasingly erratic, and our planned moments of quality time together now seemed contingent on whenever her patrol partner decided to work overtime. There were instances where she would abruptly alter our plans to join him on patrol. I pointed out the absurdity of the situation, reminding her that this wasn't the military, and they weren't engaged in a life-or-death battle where such flexibility was necessary. I argued that they could easily find a replacement for him, regardless of his profession. However, her response only served to frustrate me further. She insisted that she didn't want to disappoint him, a statement that only fueled my growing suspicion of an affair. When I confronted her about my concerns and suggested that she cease partnering with him due to my suspicions, she accused me of being insecure. She went on to reassure me that he was married with children and adamantly declared that he would never cheat on his wife. Yet, to me, her vehement defense of his loyalty seemed to imply that she had, at the very least, entertained the idea of infidelity with him, else why vouch so strongly for his fidelity? Her attempts to brush off my concerns by claiming that women at work were constantly hitting on him, but he remained faithful, did little to quell my unease. Furthermore, the fact that he consistently liked all of her photos on Facebook raised even more questions in my mind. I mean, who does that, especially with a married woman? When I confronted her about it, all she offered in response was that he was simply her work partner, a response that did little to assuage my growing apprehension. As the days passed, my suspicions continued to gnaw at me, eating away at the trust that once formed the foundation of our relationship. I found myself constantly questioning her actions and motives, unable to shake the feeling that something was amiss. Our once harmonious marriage now felt strained, overshadowed by doubt and uncertainty. I longed for the days when our bond was strong, but it seemed like those days were slipping further and further away with each passing moment. From that point on, our marriage seemed to be sailing through troubled waters. My feelings towards my wife began to sour as she adamantly refused to cut ties with this coworker of hers. It became increasingly apparent that she didn't seem to care about how uncomfortable his presence made me feel. Despite my persistent questioning, she maintained that she had severed professional connections with him. However, upon investigation, I discovered that he still remained her patrol partner. At one juncture, she casually mentioned her desire to take a hiatus from her law enforcement duties to focus on starting a family. She also spoke about discontinuing her birth control. At the time, I didn't view it with suspicion, perhaps because her colleague already had children, and we had talked about starting a family ourselves. Roughly a month later, she found out she was pregnant. Around the same time, I landed a job as a field technician at a medical equipment service company. The offer was too lucrative to turn down, despite the fact that it required me to travel extensively. Consequently, I found myself on the road 3 days a week. Meanwhile, my wife, who was 3 to 4 months pregnant by then, took some time off from her job. I couldn't help but notice her rather idle days at home, but I didn't dwell on it too much. Upon returning from one of my business trips, a neighbor I had previously helped with car repairs informed me that a police officer had been frequenting our house for the past 3 days, lingering for hours at a time. Given that my wife was on a break from work, there seemed to be no justifiable reason for such visits. I confronted her about it, initially met with denial. However, when I mentioned the eyewitness accounts from our neighbors, her story quickly changed. She claimed she sought company while I was away, dismissing the visits as innocent. I challenged her, questioning why she hadn't reached out to her friends instead. In response, she accused me of blowing the situation out of proportion and labeled me as insecure. I retorted by stating that if her actions hadn't raised suspicion, I wouldn't have felt insecure in the first place. The tension between us reached a boiling point when she resorted to physical violence, delivering not 1, not 2, but 3 slaps to my face. In response, I instinctively intervened, gently seizing her hand before it could strike again. Mindful of her condition, given she was 5 months pregnant, I exercised restraint, ensuring my actions were tempered and avoided causing harm. Her sudden outburst didn't entirely catch me off guard. Recalling past instances of her physical aggression, although they had been few and far between, it became evident that this was her default reaction when confronted with fault or the possibility of losing an argument. In a decisive move, I calmly but firmly immobilized both of her hands, guiding her towards the exit amid her vehement protests and a barrage of verbal assaults aimed my way. Despite the commotion, I remained steadfast in my decision not to allow her to stay the night, mindful of the potential embarrassment our quarrel might bring if overheard by our neighbors. With careful yet deliberate actions, I escorted her to the front door, where I gently set her outside, promptly securing the entrance behind her to prevent any further attempts to re-enter. Despite her continued efforts to force her way back in, I stood firm in my resolve. Faced with the closed door, she sought refuge elsewhere, turning to our neighbor for assistance. In a surprising turn of events, she reached out not to family or close friends, but to her patrol partner, the very person with whom she had formed a concerning bond. In a show of solidarity, he arrived at our doorstep, his police authority in full display, accompanied by a fellow officer. Despite their accusations and attempts to intimidate, I stood my ground, armed with tangible evidence of her aggression. The scars on my person and the photographs I had taken served as undeniable proof of her role as the aggressor in our altercation. He seemed poised to resort to lethal force, his intentions perhaps shadowed by ulterior motives, potentially paving the way for his clandestine rendezvous with my wife. Despite her attempts to fabricate a narrative, pinning the blame on me for the altercation, she lacked the substantiating evidence. Meanwhile, I bore the physical scars of her aggression, a silent testament to the truth of the matter. Nevertheless, I found myself shackled, treated as a criminal within the confines of my own home, and instructed to vacate the premises, if only for the duration of that tumultuous night. Taking refuge at my neighbor's abode, I grappled with the lingering trauma of the incident, my resolve fortified by the egregiousness of the injustice I had endured. Determined to seek redress, I harbored no illusions about the arduous legal battle that lay ahead, particularly given the falsification of the domestic incident report. As the first light of dawn filtered through the curtains, I returned to the scene of the upheaval, met with a semblance of contrition from my wife. Yet, amidst her apologies, the stark reality of our irreconcilable differences became increasingly apparent. Recognizing the necessity for a period of separation, I broached the subject with a heavy heart, acutely aware of the impending arrival of our child. In a moment fraught with bitter irony, I suggested she seek solace from the very individual she had summoned for aid the previous day. With a heavy heart, I took my leave, offering assurances of continued financial support, albeit from a distance. Resolute in my decision, I could not bear the thought of cohabiting with a partner enmeshed in infidelity. Despite her fervent denials, the truth remained an immutable specter, casting its long shadow over our fractured relationship. In the quiet aftermath of the storm that was my marriage coming to a pause, the silence of my phone was short-lived. It began to ring with a persistence that was hard to ignore. On the other end was my wife, her voice laced with a mixture of hope and desperation, urging me to reconsider and return to the nest we had built together. I found myself in a delicate dance of words, trying to convey that my absence was not just physical due to my work commitments out of town, but also a necessary emotional distance we needed to navigate through until our baby's arrival. I had envisioned a simple plan: to return post my field assignment, gather my personal effects, and then ponder over the next chapter of our lives. Our conversations continued over the phone, a bridge over the chasm that had formed between us. We treaded around discussions of fidelity, or the lack thereof. Each time I ventured into the territory of her alleged affair, she would erect walls of denial, her words painting a picture of innocence, and any suggestion of her infidelity was met with a fiery temper. My arsenal against these claims was not fortified with evidence, only the weapons of suspicion and gut feelings. Despite this, she seemed to have waged a successful campaign in the court of public opinion amongst our kin and comrades. She had preemptively laid her case before my own flesh and blood, portraying me as the deserter, the one who left a pregnant woman to fend for herself. My parents, swayed by the prospect of cradling their grandchild in her well-crafted narrative, sided with her. I attempted to unveil my side of the story, to shed light on the shadows that I believed hid her lover and the truth of my forceful eviction. But my words fell on deaf ears, dismissed as mere fiction. The discord between her father and me was no secret, and when his voice came through the line, heavy with threats, I chose to sever the connection. Our mutual dislike was a well-trodden path, and this call was just another pebble on it. Our shared circle of friends was not spared from this drama. She had reached out to them first, her tears painting her as the victim, a soon-to-be mother without support. Their hearts went out to her, and it seemed I had lost not just a partner but friends as well. The narrative she spun was effective, leaving me isolated in a tale where I was the antagonist, and she, the wronged heroine. This entire situation led people to sympathize with her. Everyone seemed to dismiss my concerns about her affair, believing that I was lying and convinced she wasn't capable of such actions. I felt completely isolated in my suspicions. I had already taken the step of speaking to my lawyer to explore my legal options against the police department. They had illegally detained me and evicted me from my own house, even though I was the victim in this situation. To make matters worse, the police officer also filed a false police report against me, which added to the complexity and frustration of my situation. Over the next 2 weeks, we had numerous phone conversations in an attempt to resolve our issues. During these calls, she managed to garner support from everyone, including my parents, who seemed to believe her side of the story. It was incredibly frustrating for me because I lacked any concrete evidence of her having an affair. All I had were my suspicions and gut feelings. This lack of evidence made it difficult for anyone to take my concerns seriously. There were moments when I even began to doubt myself. I started questioning whether I was imagining things or being overly paranoid. During our separation, my neighbor, who was at home frequently, kept an eye on my wife. He mentioned to me that he never saw a police car around our house, and that my wife rarely left the house except to buy groceries. This information added to my confusion and self-doubt. I started thinking that maybe I was wrong in accusing her of infidelity. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts and emotions. About a month after our separation, when my wife was around 6 months pregnant, we reconciled, and I moved back in with her. The atmosphere was almost surreal. It felt like nothing had happened, as if we had gone back to the good old days. She made every effort to ensure that I didn't suspect anything. Her actions and demeanor were aimed at restoring my trust and making me feel secure in our relationship once again. Despite everything that had happened, I wanted to believe in her and move forward together. However, I wasn't home all the time due to my work commitments. Because of this, I couldn't rely on my neighbor to keep watch constantly since he had his own job and responsibilities. Recognizing the limitations, I decided to take matters into my own hands by installing several hidden cameras around the house. My goal was to catch her in the act if she was indeed cheating. I placed these cameras strategically in the bedroom, living room, and driveway, covering all the crucial areas where any suspicious activity might occur. That particular month, I traveled more than I ever had before. I was away from home for extended periods, sometimes even leaving for an entire week. This was deliberate on my part to provide her with ample opportunity to cheat if she was inclined to do so. I wanted to create situations where, if she were unfaithful, she would feel it was safe to act on it. The cameras remained in place for nearly a month. Every chance I got, I meticulously reviewed the footage, hoping to find some evidence of her infidelity. However, there was no sign of her work partner, and her behavior didn't appear suspicious at all. She went about her daily routines as usual, and there was nothing in the recordings that suggested she was having an affair. It seemed like there was nothing to see. Eventually, I decided to give up on the idea of catching her red-handed. My suspicions lingered, but without concrete evidence, I was stuck. She wouldn't confess to anything, and I had nothing substantial to support my claims. It was an incredibly frustrating situation to be in, feeling like something was wrong but having no proof. Fast forward a few months to when she was approximately 7.5 months pregnant. By this time, our troubled past seemed to be a distant memory. We had managed to reconcile and move past the earlier tensions. Wanting to be there for her as she neared her due date, I decided to limit my work-related travel to the local area. I wanted to spend more time with my wife and support her during this critical period. Being at home more often, I couldn't help but notice that she was frequently engrossed in texting on her phone. At first, I assumed it was just her friends and family reaching out to her, offering support and checking in. Because of this, I didn't pay much attention to it initially. However, as the days went by, the constant texting started to bother me. It reached a point where I couldn't enjoy our time together without her phone constantly buzzing and drawing her attention away. The persistent distraction made it difficult for us to connect and enjoy each other's company. This new behavior added another layer of tension to our already strained relationship. Despite my efforts to be present and supportive, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that her constant phone use brought into our lives. What struck me as suspicious was how she answered her phone. The way she smiled, chuckled, and tried to hide it made it seem like she didn't want me to notice. Her behavior was different, and it was hard not to feel uneasy about it. At first, I didn't think she would be cheating or chatting with another guy, especially given her condition, as she was nearly 8 months pregnant at the time. I thought to myself that it didn't make sense for her to be involved with someone else in such a delicate state. However, one evening while we were watching TV, her phone received a text notification. She picked it up and immediately walked into the bathroom, making it glaringly obvious that she was hiding something. This was a red flag that I couldn't ignore. I lowered the volume on the TV and approached the bathroom door, hoping to eavesdrop on her conversation. But all I could hear was the sound of her typing away on her phone. The silence, except for the soft tapping of her fingers on the screen, was unnerving. It was at that moment that I began to suspect something was amiss. My wife uses an iPhone with fingerprint verification, and we've never shared our passwords. This added to my frustration because it meant I had no easy way to check what she was doing on her phone. So, I patiently waited for her to fall asleep one night. Once she was asleep, I carefully used her fingers to unlock her phone. My heart was pounding as I tiptoed into the bathroom to read her text messages. The last person she had been texting was someone named Sophie. Now, what struck me as strange was that the only text I could see from Sophie was a simple, "Sweet dreams." Innocent, right? But here's the catch. My wife had been in the bathroom texting for a good 30 minutes, and the only visible message was that one phrase from Sophie. This didn't add up. The last text message on the caller ID, which was from someone else, dated almost 3 hours ago. So, the logical conclusion was that she must have deleted the other messages to hide something. At that moment, my instinct started tingling again, and I felt a sickening sensation in my stomach. I began to suspect that she might be up to her old tricks or possibly never stopped cheating, just became more discreet about it. The thought that she could be hiding something from me, especially at such a critical time in our lives, was unbearable. My mind raced with possibilities, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. From that point on, I was on high alert, watching for any signs that could confirm my suspicions. Every time her phone buzzed or she stepped out of the room to take a call, my anxiety spiked. The trust that had been slowly rebuilding between us was once again on shaky ground, and I didn't know how much longer I could endure this state of constant doubt and fear. The whole situation left me feeling isolated and paranoid, questioning everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I jotted down Sophie's number and stealthily returned to bed, but I could barely sleep that night. My mind was racing, filled with worry and anxiety, which kept me tossing and turning until the early hours of the morning. I kept replaying the events in my head, trying to piece together what was really going on. The following day, during my lunch break, I decided to take action. I found a pay phone, a little secluded spot where I could make the call without anyone noticing, and dialed the number I had written down. My heart was pounding as I waited for someone to pick up, each ring amplifying my tension. I had a strong hunch that the number belonged to her patrol partner. When the call connected, I pretended to be from a utility company and casually mentioned his name. I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside I was a bundle of nerves. Without hesitation, he confirmed his identity with a simple, "This is me." In that instant, all my suspicions came rushing back. My worst fears were seemingly confirmed. I realized I wasn't just imagining things or being paranoid, there was something real behind my fears, something that I could no longer ignore. At this point, I didn't have the energy to confront her directly. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The weight of the situation was crushing, and considering she was due to give birth soon, I felt it was best to wait. I couldn't bear the thought of adding more stress to an already delicate time. I had plans to leave her after the baby arrived, hoping that by then I would have the strength to make such a difficult decision. I felt trapped in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. But every time I looked at her with her pregnant belly, I felt a deep attachment and a longing to spend the rest of my life with her. There was something about seeing her carry our child that stirred a profound sense of love and responsibility in me. I couldn't understand why she couldn't just remain loyal so that we could create the perfect family. It pained me deeply to think that our dreams of a happy family were being shattered by her actions. I envisioned the future we could have had together, filled with love and joy, and it broke my heart to see it slipping away. I wanted to have a conversation with her, to ask why she continued to chat with this guy, why she was lying, and causing me so much pain. The thought of this conversation weighed heavily on me. I rehearsed the words in my mind over and over again, wondering how she would react, hoping for some sort of explanation that could make sense of it all. I was visibly depressed and anxious, especially with the baby on the way. The stress of the situation was almost unbearable, and I struggled to keep it together. My work suffered, my interactions with friends and family were strained, and I felt like a shadow of my former self. A few months later, she gave birth to a baby boy. Holding our son for the first time, I felt a mix of overwhelming love and lingering sadness. The arrival of our baby should have been a joyous occasion, but it was overshadowed by the unresolved issues between us. I continued to grapple with my feelings, torn between my love for my family and the betrayal I couldn't forget. Each day was a struggle to reconcile the joy of being a new father with the pain of a broken relationship. I looked at our son and saw a future filled with possibilities, yet I couldn't shake the feeling of doubt and mistrust that had taken root in my heart. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself more and more consumed by these conflicting emotions. I wanted to be the best father I could be, to provide a loving and stable home for our child. But the uncertainty and suspicion gnawed at me, making it difficult to fully embrace the happiness that our son brought into our lives. I hoped that somehow, some way, we could find a way to move past this, to heal the wounds and rebuild the trust that had been lost. But for now, all I could do was take it one day at a time, trying to navigate the complexities of love, betrayal, and new parenthood. It never once crossed my mind that the baby might not be mine. Despite the passing resemblance to her, I chalked it up to the unpredictability of genetics, especially in those early days when distinguishing features are still taking shape. Truly, determining parentage at such a tender age is a bit like trying to predict the weather. Everyone has their guesses, but no one can be entirely certain until time reveals the truth. After she was discharged from the hospital, I decided to bide my time before broaching the delicate subject of the mysterious text messages. I needed a moment to collect my thoughts and approach the situation with a level head. So, I waited, allowing the days to pass before summoning the courage to address the elephant in the room. When the opportune moment presented itself, I finally initiated the conversation. At first, she brushed off my concerns with a flippant explanation, attributing the messages to a female friend of hers. Yet, deep down, I knew there was more to the story. Call it intuition or a gut feeling, but something didn't quite add up. It was as if there were shadows lurking beneath the surface, waiting to be unveiled. Then came the pivotal moment. I revealed that I had taken the liberty of calling the number myself, only to have her patrol partner answer on the other end. The shock registered on her face, fleeting yet unmistakable. In that instant, the air grew thick with tension, and the truth hung between us like a heavy fog. Despite her denials, I could sense the weight of her deception pressing down upon us. Sensing an opportunity to clear the air once and for all, I proposed that we dial the number on speakerphone and confront the situation head-on. But she balked at the suggestion, refusing to entertain the idea. It was a refusal that spoke volumes, sealing my decision once and for all. I couldn't continue to live in a relationship built on half-truths and evasion. With a heavy heart, I expressed my frustration and disillusionment, informing her of my decision to leave once more. It was a painful choice, one fraught with uncertainty and heartache, but I knew deep down that it was the right one. As the gravity of the situation sank in, she pleaded with me, her facade crumbling as she finally confessed to the truth. In a moment of raw vulnerability, she admitted that the messages did indeed originate from her patrol partner, a revelation that cut me to the core. Her explanation was a mix of guilt and desperation, a confession born out of necessity rather than genuine remorse. She revealed that she had concealed his identity out of fear of upsetting me, resorting to deceit in a misguided attempt to spare my feelings. Despite the betrayal, a flicker of hope remained. She agreed to my ultimatum, vowing to sever all ties with her co-worker and seek employment elsewhere. It was a small victory in the face of overwhelming adversity, but one that offered a glimmer of redemption amidst the chaos. Yet, even as we took tentative steps towards reconciliation, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt that lingered in the back of my mind. The wounds inflicted by her betrayal ran deep, casting a shadow over our once idyllic relationship. But for the sake of our family, I was willing to give her a second chance, to believe in the possibility of redemption. As the weeks passed, we navigated the rocky terrain of forgiveness and reconciliation, each day bringing us closer to healing the fractures that threatened to tear us apart. With the support of our families, we embarked on a journey of rebuilding, determined to forge a stronger, more resilient bond in the wake of adversity. Together, we celebrated the arrival of our newborn son, a beacon of hope amidst the tumultuous seas of uncertainty. It was a moment of pure joy, a testament to the resilience of love in the face of adversity. And as we held our precious bundle of joy in our arms, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together, united in our commitment to building a brighter future for our family. Fast forward a few months into my field assignments, and a nagging sense of unease began to gnaw at me. There were countless instances where I attempted to reach out to her, only to be met with silence. Her failure to respond or return my calls, even during the times she should have been at home caring for our child, raised red flags in my mind. Upon sharing my concerns with my neighbor, I was confronted with a startling revelation: my wife's nocturnal excursions. It was a gut-wrenching blow, learning that she spent most nights away from our home while I was away on assignments. This revelation fueled my growing suspicions, leading me to believe that there was more to her behavior than met the eye. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I resolved to take matters into my own hands. Armed with a GPS device, I embarked on a clandestine mission to uncover the truth. My objective was clear: to track her movements and ascertain the reasons behind her unexplained absences and avoidance of my calls. To avoid arousing suspicion, I orchestrated a strategic plan of action. I approached my boss under the guise of seeking local assignments, citing a desire to spend more time with my family. This ruse provided me with the perfect cover to closely monitor the GPS device without raising any eyebrows. In a bid to further conceal my intentions, I concocted a false narrative for my wife. I informed her that I would be traveling out of state for work, a carefully crafted alibi that afforded me the freedom to discreetly surveil her movements in my absence. The moment of truth arrived when, on the day of my supposed departure, my wife's behavior took a suspicious turn. Under the cloak of darkness, she embarked on a mysterious journey to an unfamiliar apartment complex. With bated breath, I followed her every move, my heart pounding with anticipation. Upon gaining access to the gated community, I discreetly parked my car a safe distance away from hers. From my vantage point, I watched intently as she disappeared into one of the units within the complex. The anticipation was palpable as I waited anxiously for her return, my mind racing with a myriad of possibilities. As the minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity, I seized the opportunity to put my plan into action. With trembling hands, I dialed her number, hoping to catch her off guard and glean some insight into her whereabouts. Yet, my efforts were met with disappointment as she failed to pick up. However, just when I was on the brink of despair, a glimmer of hope emerged. Roughly half an hour later, she returned my call, unwittingly providing me with a crucial clue in unraveling the mystery that had consumed my thoughts for so long. I questioned her about the delay in answering, noticing the background noise. Her explanation of tending to the baby seemed plausible, but I probed further, subtly asking if she was indeed at home. Her insistence on being home lacked conviction, prompting me to delve deeper into the matter. To test her honesty, I mentioned my early return from work, revealing my imminent arrival at the airport. Her reaction betrayed her surprise, stumbling over her words as she struggled to formulate a response. Sensing her discomfort, I pressed for an explanation, but she faltered, unable to provide a satisfactory reason for her behavior. It became increasingly apparent that her readiness to receive me was not as genuine as she had led me to believe. As our conversation unfolded, her responses grew increasingly vague, leaving me puzzled and suspicious. It was clear that she was grasping at straws, attempting to concoct an excuse for her actions. Faced with her evasiveness, I reluctantly ended the call, awaiting her explanation upon my arrival. Moments later, I observed her hurried departure from the apartment, laden with baby paraphernalia. However, it was the figure trailing behind her, cradling the baby with an unsettling sense of familiarity, that sent a shiver down my spine. As they approached the SUV, the presence of her patrol partner, unbidden and unannounced, shattered any illusions of fidelity. In that moment of clarity, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, confirming my worst fears. Despite her assurances of no contact, it was evident that their illicit relationship persisted unabated. His casual demeanor as he held the baby only served to deepen my suspicions, casting doubt on the paternity of our child. Unable to contain my emotions any longer, I confronted them without hesitation. Their stunned expressions spoke volumes as I exposed their deceit, laying bare the betrayal that had festered in the shadows. There was no need for further pretense. Their actions had spoken louder than words, revealing a truth that could no longer be denied. She didn't offer any apologies or explanations, her hurried retreat into the car signaling her acknowledgement of being caught red-handed. With a screech of tires, they bolted out of the apartment parking lot, leaving behind a trail of deceit and betrayal. Feeling a mix of anger and disappointment, I wasted no time in taking action. With a heavy heart, I climbed into my own vehicle, fingers trembling as I dialed her father's number. I spared no details, recounting the shameful scene that had unfolded before my eyes. In no uncertain terms, I informed him of his daughter's infidelity, a bitter truth I had long suspected but never dared to confront until now. As I spoke, the weight of my words hung heavy in the air, each syllable a painful reminder of the shattered trust between us. I didn't mince words as I expressed my doubts about the child's paternity, a dagger of uncertainty that pierced the heart of our once solid bond. I laid bare the harsh reality, that the baby she cradled in her arms likely belonged to a man already bound by the vows of marriage, his own family left to bear the burden of his betrayal. In the heat of the moment, I may have let my emotions get the best of me, but I harbored no regrets. For too long, this woman had played me for a fool, spinning webs of lies and deceit to suit her own selfish desires. But now, I had torn down the facade, exposing the truth for all to see. Like a hunter flushing out prey from its hiding spot, I had unmasked them, stripping away the layers of deception that had clouded my judgment for far too long. If she truly had no intention of being with me, why resort to such underhanded tactics to keep me tethered to her side? True to form, when I returned home, she was nowhere to be found, her absence a stark reminder of the gaping void that now loomed between us. Yet, the following day brought a torrent of tearful apologies, her voice choked with emotion as she pleaded her innocence. She begged to return home, citing the baby's needs as her justification, a feeble attempt to salvage what little remained of our fractured relationship. But as I listened to her pleas, I couldn't shake the nagging sense of betrayal that lingered in the depths of my soul. How could I trust her again after everything that had transpired? The wounds were too deep, the scars too raw to simply be brushed aside with a few tears and empty promises. She expressed restlessness, attributing it to the baby's persistent cries. In response, I offered her the option to return home, but I made it abundantly clear that I was leaving. My decision was fueled by lingering doubts regarding the baby's paternity, a cloud of uncertainty that hung heavy over our fractured relationship. With a heavy heart, I broached the topic of divorce, resolved to sever ties once and for all. Undeterred by my stance, she vehemently insisted that the baby was indeed mine, issuing a dire warning of potential regrets should I choose to deny it. Yet, I remained resolute, emphasizing the imperative need for a DNA test to definitively confirm paternity. The fact that she had not taken the simple step of blocking her former patrol partner's contact only served to cast further doubt on her assertions of innocence. In an attempt to avoid further confrontation, she returned home accompanied by a female friend, a thinly veiled effort to shield herself from my scrutiny. Aware of the potential escalation that would accompany the presence of her former patrol partner, she strategically chose to keep him at bay. Determined to seek clarity amidst the chaos, I wasted no time in procuring a DNA kit online, opting for expedited delivery to hasten the resolution of our uncertainties. In the days that followed, I found myself ensnared in a tumultuous whirlwind of emotions, grappling with the weight of uncertainty while navigating the logistical intricacies of the testing process. As the DNA test kit finally arrived, I was confronted with a fresh set of challenges. With my wife seemingly always in close proximity to the baby, finding an opportune moment to discreetly collect a genetic sample proved to be a Herculean task. It wasn't until the passage of several tense days that tentative communication between us resumed, with my sole objective being to secure her consent to hold the baby, if only for a fleeting moment. Despite the emotional turmoil that threatened to consume me, my affection for the child remained steadfast. I clung to the hope that the results of the DNA test would ultimately validate my deepest desires, affirming my aspirations of fatherhood. With a mixture of trepidation and anticipation, I discreetly collected the genetic sample, steeling myself for the inevitable revelation that lay ahead. When the long-awaited results finally arrived, I found myself working in a distant corner of the city. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I braced myself for the crushing blow as I logged in to view the outcome online. The truth, though agonizing, was irrefutable: the baby was not mine. In a moment of profound resignation, I shared the results with my parents, silently yearning for a glimmer of validation in the face of overwhelming disappointment. Deep down, a part of me harbored a fervent wish that the outcome had been different. I also made sure to forward the results to her father, serving as a stark reminder of his daughter's indiscretions. Despite all she had put me through, I opted not to personally deliver the results to her. It was clear that after enduring such betrayal, she likely harbored suspicions of the truth. With no shared assets to complicate matters, the divorce proceedings should proceed smoothly, according to legal guidelines. Under the law, I am recognized as the presumed father due to my marital status at the time of the child's birth. However, to formally dissolve the legal parent-child relationship, settle support obligations, and terminate the marriage, I must navigate the complex legal channels. With this in mind, I wasted no time in seeking the guidance of a divorce lawyer, ensuring that the process with my wife would be initiated swiftly and efficiently. An update on my journey: it's been 14 months since I parted ways with my unfaithful wife, and much has transpired since then. Faced with persistent harassment from the police in my hometown, despite filing complaints and initiating legal action, I made the difficult decision to uproot myself and seek refuge elsewhere. Drawn to the tranquility of rural life, I chose to settle in the countryside, far removed from the hustle and bustle of city living. With a penchant for outdoor pursuits like hunting and camping, I found solace in the vast expanse of nature. My frequent work-related travels made the exact location of my residence inconsequential, allowing me the freedom to roam. In addition to establishing my new home base, I invested in acres of land dedicated to my beloved pastimes of hunting and camping. These sprawling acres provided a sanctuary where I could unwind and reconnect with nature during my downtime, away from the demands of work. As for the aftermath of serving divorce papers to my estranged wife, chaos ensued. Despite her persistent attempts to reach me, I maintained my resolve and refused to entertain her calls. 2 days following the legal proceedings, I returned home with a U-Haul in tow, ready to reclaim my belongings and move forward with my life. This marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with the promise of self-discovery and renewal as I forged ahead on my journey of healing and growth. When I reached our shared home, she was there, a somber figure, attempting to obstruct my departure. Despite her efforts, I remained steadfast, gathering only what was rightfully mine and leaving behind the remnants of our fractured union. The air was thick with the weight of finality, as it became painfully apparent to both her and those around us that our once promising marriage had irreparably crumbled, exposing her true character in the harsh light of reality. No longer able to wield her manipulative charm over me or sway the opinions of our mutual acquaintances, she found herself stripped of the facade she had carefully constructed. The irrefutable evidence of the DNA test results had shattered the illusions she had woven around herself, leaving her exposed and vulnerable in the harsh glare of truth. As I meticulously packed my belongings, preparing to bid adieu to the home we had once shared, I felt a bittersweet pang of nostalgia, tempered by the undeniable sense of relief that accompanied the closure of this tumultuous chapter of my life. In the midst of the chaos, I found myself compelled to make a poignant request of my soon-to-be ex-wife. Despite the acrimony that lingered between us, there remained a glimmer of tenderness in my heart, a lingering hope that I could still share a fleeting moment of connection with the innocent babe we had brought into this world. With tear-streaked cheeks and a heavy heart, she acquiesced to my request, allowing me to cradle the child in my arms one final time, a silent farewell to the dreams of fatherhood that had once danced tantalizingly on the horizon. Her tearful apology and heartfelt remorse pierced through the layers of resentment and anger that had encased my heart, stirring a wellspring of conflicting emotions within me. In that moment of vulnerability, I was acutely aware of the fragility of our shared humanity, bound together by the ties of love and loss that transcended the boundaries of our fractured relationship. And so, with a heavy heart and a silent prayer for healing, I returned the babe to her waiting arms, silently retreating into the shadows as I embarked on the uncertain journey that lay ahead. Seeking solace in the familiar embrace of my childhood home, I grappled with the weight of uncertainty that hung heavy in the air. With no clear path forward and the specter of divorce looming ominously on the horizon, I resolved to take each day as it came, trusting that time would eventually heal the wounds that still festered within my soul. Little did I know that fate had other plans in store, leading me down a winding path that would ultimately lead me to the tranquil countryside where I would find sanctuary amidst the sprawling expanse of my own property. Nestled within this bucolic paradise lies a sprawling tract of land, replete with rolling hills and verdant meadows, a haven where I could lose myself in the timeless beauty of nature, finding solace in the rhythm of the changing seasons. It was here, amidst the tranquil embrace of the countryside, that I found the peace and serenity that had eluded me for so long, a balm for the wounds of the past and a promise of renewal for the future. Yet, even amidst the tranquility of my newfound sanctuary, the specter of injustice lingered, casting a shadow over the idyllic landscape. It was a bitter reminder of the betrayal and deceit that had torn apart the fabric of my once happy life, leaving me to pick up the pieces in the aftermath of the storm. And so, with a heavy heart and a renewed sense of purpose, I resolved to seek out the truth and expose the lies that had threatened to consume me, trusting that justice would eventually prevail in the end. Initially, when the flashing lights of the patrol car appeared in my rearview mirror, a pang of suspicion gripped me, leading me to speculate that perhaps it was orchestrated by my ex-wife's clandestine lover. However, to my bewilderment, the officer who approached my window was a complete stranger, a face I hadn't seen before. It had been eons since I'd last encountered any law enforcement, so this encounter felt like a bolt from the blue, a random twist of fate that I couldn't quite comprehend. The accusation leveled against me was that I had exceeded the speed limit by 10 miles, an assertion that I vehemently disputed. Yet, despite my protestations and attempts to reason with the officer, he remained steadfast in his decision, issuing me a citation and instructing me to appear in court to contest the charge. For those well-versed in the labyrinthine workings of the legal system, the prospect of challenging a traffic ticket often comes with its own set of challenges and potential financial pitfalls. Faced with the dilemma of either engaging in a protracted legal battle or opting for defensive driving to expunge the infraction from my record, I begrudgingly chose the latter, resigning myself to the fact that this encounter was but a minor hiccup in the grand tapestry of life's trials and tribulations. However, fate had other plans in store for me, as less than a week later, I found myself once again at the receiving end of a speeding ticket. This time, my disbelief morphed into frustration, as it seemed increasingly apparent that I was being unfairly targeted by law enforcement. The line of questioning employed by the officers felt like a deliberate attempt to provoke me, insinuating that I might be harboring warrants or operating a stolen vehicle, an absurd notion given that my identity had already been verified. In the face of such blatant injustice, I dared to voice my indignation, only to be met with hostility and aggression from the very individuals tasked with upholding the law. Despite my insistence on speaking with their superior and my repeated assertions of innocence, I found myself summarily dragged from my vehicle, my hands restrained in cold, unforgiving steel handcuffs. The physical altercation that ensued left me nursing painful injuries, a split lip, abrasions on my hands, and a throbbing ache in my back, a stark reminder of the brutal reality of unchecked authority. A night spent languishing behind bars followed, a stark and sobering experience that served as a stark reminder of the fragility of freedom. Yet, amidst the darkness and despair, a glimmer of hope emerged in the form of unwavering support from my parents, who stood by my side as I embarked on the arduous journey of seeking justice against those responsible for my unjust detention. It soon became evident that my ex-wife's paramour was pulling strings behind the scenes, orchestrating a malicious campaign designed to discredit and defame me at every turn. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, my parents implored me to flee the suffocating confines of the city, where the long arm of the law seemed to reach with unrelenting ferocity. Determined to escape the clutches of persecution, I set my sights on the vast expanse of the countryside, where I hoped to find solace amidst the serene beauty of nature. There, far removed from the prying eyes of law enforcement, I sought refuge from the relentless onslaught of adversity that had plagued me for far too long. Looking back on the tumultuous events that had unfolded, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the small mercies that had spared me from even greater harm. Had the officers chosen to plant illegal contraband in my vehicle, the consequences could have been far more dire, potentially resulting in imprisonment and the loss of my livelihood. Yet, in the face of such adversity, I remained resolute in my determination to assert my rights and refused to be cowed by those who sought to wield their authority as a weapon against me. In my pursuit of justice, I initiated legal proceedings against my ex-wife's paramour, embarking on a journey through the intricate labyrinth of the legal system. Armed with evidence of his duplicity, I sought recompense for the distress he had caused, filing a lawsuit for his role in fabricating a false police report. Additionally, I brought charges against the officers who had unlawfully detained me, holding them accountable for their actions. As the wheels of justice turned, I found myself shouldering the burden of proof, tasked with presenting a compelling case to substantiate my claims. Delving into a sea of documentation, I unearthed a wealth of evidence elucidating the intricate web of deceit spun by my ex-wife's lover. From incriminating correspondence to irrefutable records of his involvement in orchestrating my arrest, each piece of evidence served as a testament to the injustice I had endured. Securing a favorable judgment in the lawsuit against my ex-wife's paramour offered a glimmer of vindication, yet the journey was far from over. Undeterred by setbacks, I pressed forward, determined to see justice served in the face of adversity. Despite the dismissal of the recent false imprisonment case, I remained resolute in my pursuit of accountability, refusing to relent until every avenue of recourse had been exhausted. Returning to the precinct, I lodged a formal complaint against my ex-wife's paramour, leveraging the weight of the civil judgment to demand accountability for his actions. Though the specifics of the disciplinary action remained shrouded in mystery, the prospect of facing repercussions loomed large, serving as a sobering reminder of the consequences of his deceit. Meanwhile, whispers of discord surfaced in his personal life, with reports hinting at a rupture in his relationship with his wife. It seemed that the facade of deception he had meticulously crafted was beginning to crumble, exposing the truth of his infidelity for all to see. As the tendrils of karma tightened their grip, his ire towards me only served to underscore the gravity of his transgressions. Amidst the tumult, my ex-wife appeared to have resumed her life, seamlessly slipping back into her role as a police officer and cohabiting with her paramour in the very apartment where their illicit affair had been laid bare. While their actions spoke volumes about their moral compass, I chose to focus on charting a new course for myself, one defined by integrity and self-respect. Embracing the prospect of new beginnings, I tentatively dipped my toes into the world of online dating, cautiously exploring the possibility of forging meaningful connections. Though the scars of past betrayal lingered, I remained steadfast in my belief that every obstacle was an opportunity for growth, every setback a chance to emerge stronger than before.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and click on the little bell icon for notifications of new stories.